this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. Being a parent, in my estimation at least, is all about benchmarks. It's about benchmarks in your child's life. And, you think back to, you first saw them crawl, or even before that, when they first rolled over, when you walk into the bedroom and into their little bedroom and you see that they've kind of rolled over in the crib for the first time. Those dates when they begin to, what they call cruise, where they're holding onto furniture and they're kind of walking around. And those first awkward steps where they're stumbling, first utterances. The first time they ever look at you and say, "Daddy, I love you." That's what parenthood, to a certain degree, is all about, particularly when you're young and you have that in your mind at all times. Since 2011, there has been an unsolved murder of a very young kid. And I say very young, he was 17. But to have a child that turns up dead and there are no answers, lo these many years, that benchmarks somebody. But today, I'm proud to say that there's another benchmark, because after all of this time, Blake Chappell's murderer has been arrested. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, we have done a previous episode on Blake's case some time ago, and this case kind of inhabited my brain for a protracted period of time. First off, I looked at this boy who grew up in a single parent household with a mother who had some physical issues. And I saw a kid who was very loving. He loved his mother. And as a matter of fact, let me tell you what kind of kid he was. Blake knew that his mama had trouble making ends meet, Dave. This child would go out before he would come to school every day. He would buy energy drinks, which I don't think at that time you could buy in a high school, and other sweets and whatnot, and take them to school, mark them up, and sell them to his classmates. You say, "Well, wow, that sounds kind of out of bounds, Morgan." No, it doesn't. You know why? Because he would take the profits from that and give to his mama so she could make rent.
He wasn't selling weed.
He was not. No, he was not selling drugs. That wasn't his thing. No. He was trying to take care of his mother in his own way. He didn't have a car,
and that actually plays into the show.
It does play into it.
Look, Blake Chappell went missing after a homecoming dance, after what he said was one of the greatest nights of his life.
Oh, yeah.
And his mother was involved in helping him along the way with this greatest night of his life, this homecoming dance. This happened October 16th, 2011. That's the night of the homecoming dance. That's the night Blake goes missing. This has been an unsolved case ever since. For 2 years in a row, in Joseph Scott Morgan's class at JSU, tell us how you gave your classes the opportunity to work an unsolved case, because didn't two of them 2 years in a row do the same case, and it was Blake Chappell?
Yeah, it was. Actually, there was a third, and just let me back up. I several years ago, I constructed a undergraduate class in cold case investigations, because look, the world that we're in now, how many Othram cases have we done, Dave? I don't even know. And that's the pinnacle of cold case from a scientific standpoint. I'm talking about forensics here. And I know that the students at Jack State is preparing right now are going to go into law enforcement workforce and forensics workforce. And let's face it, cold cases are they're steadily becoming the meat and potatoes of any agency. They know that they got to get these. Yeah, I know, it's amazing because so many years they just sat on the shelf gathering dust.
I was a member. TV is the reason.
Yeah, I think so, and also the advancement in DNA. I think so, and also there are people out there that have had enough time on the streets as investigators that they're developing methodologies and now textbooks for undergraduates. And you can take that recipe. My wife claims, by the way, Kimmy claims that give her a textbook and she'd teach anything. I was like, how about differential equations? How's that? And it's a, no.
Gym teacher who teaches special children with to wear helmets all the time. The class that I was in. But now we have the groundwork laid, and I've gone through several texts till I settled on one that's written by my good friend Joe Chicalone up in New York. He's a Bronx homicide detective, retired, and he was a cold case guy. Jack Alone wrote a book, man.
Yeah, Jack Alone did, man, and it's fantastic.
You use it?
Yeah, I use it. I use it at Jack State. Yeah,
I didn't know he could read. Oh my God!
Don't let Joe hear you say that. You're going to crush his soul. Don't say that.
No,
yeah, I love that guy.
I'll tell you what, man. He's scared. He invited me to church, and I was scared. I'm not kidding. I started confessing right there in the car. You got an unsolved homicide. I'm your guy. I'm not kidding. Invites me to church, and I feel.
Joe's masterful, and the work that he's done, the text that he's created. And so hopefully he'll send us that $20 that he owes us for this. But yeah, he's written a fantastic cold case book, and I use it in my class. So, for a number of years, this case was not even on my radar. It's something that even we're on kind of the periphery of the Atlanta metro area. We're over in Alabama, but some of the stuff kind of leaches over out of Georgia. And even this had not made it onto my radar. I don't even think that Nancy had covered it, over the years. And this is, down in Noonan, Georgia. It's kind of southwest of Atlanta. And it came to my attention because of my students in this class. Some of them, we've got a lot of students at Jack State that, though we're in Alabama, they come from Georgia because of the forensics program. We are the standard, in the Southeast, as far as I'm concerned, from a perspective of forensic investigations. And so one of the kids came up to me and said, Professor Morgan, our team, and they were 4-person teams. I break them out into 4-person teams. And what they do is they will take an unsolved case, and I have them work it just like their law enforcement, but there are certain things they can't do. They don't have, obviously, any kind of investigatory powers.
Right.
They can't go out and interview people. You can call people and ask if you can speak with them, but they don't show up at a door and say, we need you to come down to headquarters with us. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing to me, starting with that first group, how they kind of built a life for Blake and his mother in class. I mean, they literally kind of conjured this up with the data that they were able to collect. The Noonan Police Department that is in charge of Blake's homicide investigation, and to their credit, they constantly, for both sets of classes that the teams that were handling this case, both sets, they said no comment. And they would both classes got referred to the Coweta County District Attorney's Office. And again, they were met with, in one case, they were met with no comment. Later, they got an ADA that gave them a bit of information, but not really a lot to sink into. Just to tell you how committed they are, from Jack State campus to where Blake's body was found, Dave, is a roughly a 2-hour and 20-minute drive, okay, through back roads. They went there. The students actually drove to Georgia, took photography equipment with them, documented the route that he was walking, actually went to the location of where his body was found, got down into this area. I'll give you more information about that in just a moment. And again, breathed life back into Blake's case from my perspective, something that had not been on my radar. I began to hear it, and it tugged at my heartstrings because of the familial circumstances that Blake was living in, being this kid that, as you pointed out, he wouldn't take no. This idea that he's gonna burn through shoe leather. If he's got to walk somewhere, it just doesn't matter. Right. He was tenacious. I often think that right now, that if Blake had lived, he would be a incredible success at whatever he was going to do, because he had that little fire that was burning within him that said, I'm not going to give in to the circumstances of my life. I'm going to go out and I'm going to make something despite of my background, where I come from. So that, I began to see this as my students would, present these cases 2 years in a row, the same case. I finally, the third year, I was like, look, you guys have got to choose another case.
We're not doing Blake again.
Yeah, we're not going to do Blake again, but it just stuck with me. And so, and I have followed it. And amazingly, those students have all graduated now from both of those classes. And I will still get emails from them asking me if I've heard anything. I'll actually have some of them email me and say, hey, people are posted stuff on the message board again. There might be something that's going to break. And of course, it never did until last week. Yep. And I got to tell you, was it you that notified me? I think it was, wasn't it?
I think so. But you're so on top of everything that I think a lot of times I tell you about something, you're going, yeah, I know. But I'll give Dave the credit here. But you know what?
Yeah.
There were things that you and I talked about when we did this, because we did it at CrimeCon.
Yeah, we did.
In front of an audience. And I was amazed at the work the students did. I was amazed at just the quality of work, but the love they put into it, because they documented, they really did a great job, first of all. Second of all, I noticed after, we talked about it, there was movement in the case. There would be movement every once in a while. And
every once in a while.
Always, they held back info. They still have not let all the info go, because they're sitting on it for one reason or another. But the bottom line is that Blake Chappell, who went to his homecoming dance, I think I said 16th. He actually went to the dance. It was on October 15th. That was the night of the dance. Yeah. And he's with, we went with his girlfriend, Rion. Is it Ryan? I always say it the wrong. Yeah. Rion.
Yeah, Ryan is how it's pronounced, though. Yeah.
They go to the East Coweta. That's how you pronounce that, right?
Coweta.
Coweta.
Yeah, Coweta. Yeah.
Wow. I always say that wrong every time.
No, that's everybody does. It's a hard word to pronounce, but yeah, Coweta. Yeah.
Okay. They go to the homecoming dance, and Blake tells his mother during a phone call that night it was the best night of his life. Had so much fun, just dancing and spending time with his friends. It's that time of life where you can still do that. Where you're right. And there's a purity to it that goes beyond so many things. And I just love it. Anyway, sometime around 10:30, Ryan's mom, Shannon, picks them up from the dance and brought them back to her home, where they watched a movie and hung out. Around 11:30, Shannon drove Blake to his friend Austin's house, where he was going to spend the night. Now, he didn't stay there at his buddy's house.
Right.
So where did he go, Joe?
Yeah, well, he decided to hoof it over to his girlfriend's house.
Yeah. They're texting the whole time.
Yeah, they are. And yeah, he wanted to continue this greatest night of his life, apparently.
Exactly. Well, I don't know too many boys that age, that time, that don't. You're 10 feet tall and bulletproof, man.
You truly are. And that's the beauty of it. And let me just kind of expand on this a little bit more. When you think about this young man and the life that he had led, he's bearing pressures in his life that most 30-year-olds might have to deal with. Can you imagine just for a moment, just for a fleeting moment, that burden because of the songs you hear, because of the perfume that the girl is wearing that chose you to be her date that night, the laughter of your friends. For just that moment, that burden for a few precious minutes is lifted off of your shoulders, and you can be a child again. You can be a young kid again. You can celebrate. You can dance. You can laugh. The one thing that he didn't realize is that the greatest night of his life was going to turn into the worst night of his life. Dave, you'd mentioned that he had gone back to the girlfriend's house, and there was something a bit, I don't know, there's not much about this case that's lighthearted, but I think that many of us, in the midst of all that is youth, you can identify. He's in her bedroom in this house, and it's actually her grandmother that walks in and catches him.
Remember, because it was Ryan's mom.
Yeah.
That drove Blake to his friend's house to go spend the night.
Yeah.
And it's already after midnight.
Yeah.
I can picture him texting Ryan while he watches mom's car pull away.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, she's gone. And he hops out and starts walking right back there.
Yeah, he does.
And he's going to sneak in. And that's what's, and because it's like 2:00 in the morning, between 2 and 3, when he actually walks back over to Ryan's house. Now, pick up with Granny, because that cracks me up every time.
Yeah, no.
It
yeah.
does.
Can you imagine you're in your girlfriend's house, and maybe Granny's a light sleeper. No one really knows, but she hears something. And lo and behold, it's Ryan's homecoming date. And there he is, Blake, in the house. Well, as you can imagine, he was cast adrift at that point in time by the family. You get out of here right now. And
already took you out of here once.
Yeah, exactly. And so off he goes. He wanders off into the night at this point in time. And this is where, things turn very dark and sinister, because there is a text message that is sent from Blake's phone. And the text message is, and I'm paraphrasing, it's something like, "The cops have stopped me. The cops have stopped me." And he's a pedestrian. And look, I got to tell you, if there's a patrol officer out there, he sees a kid, Blake's, he's not a big kid. He's, I'm not going to say he's diminutive, but if there's a patrol officer that's out there and he's walking down the street, it's going to draw the attention of a police officer. They're going to pull over and they're going to say, "Hey, why are you out at this time of night?" I don't know if there was a curfew, but I'm sure the cop would say, "You're out way late. Where are you headed? What are you doing?" Right. Well, he sends this text off and says that he has been stopped by the police at this point in time. And he falls off the planet. He just disappears. He vaporizes into nothing. And this is a kid that had contact with all of his buddies, with his mother, and with his girlfriend. There, he's in kind of a tight-knit group.
He leaves there at like 5 a.m. and he's texting his girlfriend. He's texting Ryan, and he's apologizing to Ryan and her mother. That's what he's doing while he's texting. Now, 5:30 in the morning. Okay. That's not a really weird time to be out on the road. It's a weird time to be walking on the road.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. And so for him to be stopped at 5:30 in the morning, I get that. But there's a couple of problems here with this, because he's texting and he's headed to Austin's house, which is where Ryan's mom had taken him to start with. He left, came back. Now he's headed back over there. As he's walking, he's sending these text messages. So we know he's in communication while he's walking, apologizing to Ryan, apologizing to her mother. probably begging, apologizing for, everything. But about 5:30 is when he sends the message to Ryan saying that he had been stopped by a police officer who had asked him where he was going and asked for his ID. And that's it. You say he fell off planet right then. Well, you would think at 5:30 in the morning, if a police officer comes in contact with anybody, before they do anything, they radio back to base. I'm stopping to check on something. The reason is you don't know if this person walking down the street is a maniac with a machine gun. You don't know if it's somebody who's in desperate need of help. You have no idea. And you say, hey, I am 10-7, whatever whatever the code is saying I'm checking on a guy. So there's got to be a record of this transaction. But
there isn't. As a matter of fact, there's two ways you can look at it from the perspective of the police. First off, you're going to have radio traffic. And the way the radio traffic would normally go would be, and you're right, because police officer, their spidey senses are up. If you've got somebody walking down the road, you don't know anything about them, you're not going to get out of the car. It's not SOP. You're not going to get out of the car without calling it in to headquarters and saying, headquarters, show me out at whatever road that the individual might be on. If they have a mile marker, they'll say on this road at Cross Street, such and such, or if they're in front of a house, show me out at 32 Maple Lane. And then they will say, I've got a white male pedestrian out here. I'm going to go talk to him. And radio will acknowledge that. And that's actually on the recording. You can go back. I've had to listen to these recordings for years and years and years.
Oh, yeah, me too.
You go back and you can listen to all of these and you can get a sense of what's going on. As a matter of fact, if the police officer engaged with an underage kid under these circumstances, they would probably write something down about it. I don't know necessarily that this would warrant a warning, but there would be some record of this somewhere. And Dave, there ain't nothing, brother. There ain't nothing. And that's the terrifying part to this, because I think it has been floated for a while. First off, there was a huge group of people that thought, well, these were rogue cops that came after, a 17-year-old kid. And I'm thinking, rogue cops? What is this, Hollywood? Why is a police officer going to come after a 17-year-old child? It just didn't make sense to me. And that was like floated out there. And you saw that on message boards over the years. My students actually had, printouts of this stuff. It just, speculation runs wild. And of course, you and I never hear about speculation, do we, Dave? And people, they draw these wild conclusions about things. But I think one of the things that was so terrifying to me was that if someone had stopped him and strong-harmed him in some way and said, give me your damn phone. And what if that last text was, the police have stopped me, and it wasn't from Blake? Was it from a perpetrator? And what could some perpetrator out there want with a 17-year-old kid? I mean, you can look at him and tell that he's underage. How much jewelry, how much money, what material possessions could this child have that a perpetrator would actually want to shake him down for? There was nowhere in the scenario did any of this make sense. And so this case started out as a runaway. That's what this came out as. This kid has taken to the streets. He's come from a broken home. Where's he going to go? He's got another girlfriend that he had previously been broken up with. It's a whole nother kettle of fish because, there were issues with that person's father. As a matter of fact, Blake was in fact taken to jail over that. There was actually a physical assault. In that circumstance, that girl had moved away and was living in an adjacent county. And a lot of people were thinking at that point in time that he had been threatened. All right. I won't go much further than that, but I will say that he had been threatened, maybe even with a weapon at some point in time. and that harm was going to come to him if he ever, showed his face again. And if I remember correctly, it seems as though that individual may have been an ex-con. I'm not really sure. It's enough to make the most mighty men tremble in their boots. How much more so a 17-year-old? And so he had,
a well, okay. Let's deal with the cop thing very quickly, because I'm not buying it. And I think a 17-year-old, he's cold. He does send a text after it, after the one about a cop just stopped me. He sends a thing saying, I'm cold. It's getting cold. And that time of day, at late October, you're talking about October in Georgia, Alabama, you got that chilly right before sun. It can be 85 degrees the next day, but it's going to be chilly at 5:30 in the morning. Yeah. It just is. And anyway, so you've got I'm not buying that a cop ever stopped him, because there's just too many things that aren't there. Too many things are not there. But I'm not out of the possibility that somebody stopped him, got his phone, and saw that he was communicating with somebody and wanted to allay some fears. A criminal, somebody who's a criminal, they'd do something. They'd pick it up and say, I just got checked by the cops. And then the next thing is, oh, it's cold. Okay. And then nothing. That's it. You got to remember, all the communication stops right after cop wanted my ID. Oh, it's getting cold. Then there's no more. So I'm thinking that maybe whoever that was, I don't think it was Blake that sent that text about there's a cop. I think that was somebody who got the phone from him. I'm just, based on the fact that we don't know anything after this moment, I just don't think it's a cop. And if it's not a cop, it's somebody bad.
Yeah, and someone that was there, to do him harm on some level. And as as it turns out, which we'll chat more about, ultimate harm was done to this child. But in the meantime, you've got the authorities, you've got his mother, who is, you can imagine, just shocked to her core at this point, because this is
because he vanishes. He vanishes after that. After what we just shared with you about a cop and I'm cold. After that, he vanishes. He's gone. There are no more texts, no more calls, no more nothing, no more sightings. He's gone. He's walking from his girlfriend's house to his best friend's house, and he vanishes. Joseph Scott Morgan, gone. 5:30 in the morning. This kid is no.
And you're thinking, how bad is his life that he would just suddenly, by the way, in the wake of what he said, the greatest night of my life. What kid pulls up stakes at that point in time and decides to disappear in the darkness, never to be seen again? That's the part that's so chilling. I think another part of this is that many of us can identify. I have to look back in time when dinosaurs roamed the earth, but I still remember how exciting homecoming was. And I remember how exciting prom was back in the day. It's a different kind of feeling. So what is it that would occur that night? And there was no indication that Ryan's family on any level was involved in this, because I think the first thing you think about is, he's in the house with my daughter at a late hour, we're going to show him. They ran down all of that and nothing came back. Dave, he went missing. I guess it was October the 16th, essentially, is when he vanishes. And he is not seen again until a gruesome discovery is made. Dave, we heard everything. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you recall this, but do you recall when we presented Blake's case at CrimeCon, and there was a story that came out about police showing up at a property where they went out to search the property. And we thought that, oh my Lord, what are they looking for at this home? And there was an indication that this had something to do with Blake's case. And I still don't to this point, because as you said, the police are keeping a really tight lid on all of their information that they have at their fingertips. what may have occurred, relative to his circumstances, what brought about his end. And to the best of our knowledge, what we know right now, we're still unsure if that search of that property that was not too far away may have borne some type of fruit. I think, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think you're right. We don't know because they didn't tell us. They told us that there was a search going on, that it had to do with Blake. And police had dealt with anonymous tips for years.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons they did keep playing it close to the vest. For the same reason you and I and everyone else is totally shocked that a young kid like that would go missing while he's walking at 5:30 in the morning and just gone, that there's nothing of him until 2 months later. And that's what we got to get to is, when did they find him, Joe? What condition was he in when he was found? Because at 5:30 in the morning, other than being a little cold, according to his last text, he's walking from his girlfriend's house to his best friend's house. Yeah, he's created a little bit of a problem for himself, but it's nothing he's not going to get past. Yeah. And he just had a great night. He had a great homecoming night with his girlfriend. Now he's walking to his best buds.
Yeah.
Yes, greatest night of his life. He's not. And so what happened? Because he's gone, and they looked for him, right? They're looking wherever.
They looked for him. They looked for him everywhere, and they could not find him. Dave, just imagine his mother, or just for a second. Goodness. 2 months, over 2 months passed by, because he went missing on October the 16th of 2011. He was found, Dave. He was found on December 19th, 2011, face down in a creek adjacent to a bridge. And here's the real kicker. He's wearing nothing but his underwear. I got to tell you, when I hear that you've got a deceased individual, they're wearing nothing but their underwear, they're a couple miles from where their home is, and they're just kind of cast off into a creek, into a body of water. First off, I can't believe that they were able to actually find his remains and that they were still intact. But they were, as a matter of fact, they were intact enough so that the state medical examiner, this is a big piece of evidence that we got, when they examined his body, Blake had been executed. He had been shot a single time in the head, and his body essentially dumped off in the creek, and there's no clothing except for his underwear. Now, what would be the motivation behind that? Well, dude, I got to tell you, man, when I see people that are either partially nude or nude and they're deceased, I always think that there's some kind of sexual component. The only other thing I can think of is you have somebody stripped down to their underwear so you can manage them and you can humiliate them. But still, with humiliation, I think that there's a sexual component to that as well. And even with all of that and finding his body, they were still at their wits' end relative to this case, because there was no further data that was coming up. Yeah, we've got this kid that has been missing for 2 months, but just because you find the body and you determine that he has been shot in the head, that doesn't equal the solving of the case. You're still here with a massive puzzle. And Dave, this has gone on now until last week for 14 years. All right, but Joe,
they never found the clothing either. They didn't find any of the clothing he had. They didn't find his cell phone. They didn't find his wallet, his ID. They didn't find anything of him except body with underwear and a shot to the back of the head. So was he, all right, let's just start with, could you tell, examining his body, how long he had been in the water? Like, could he have been shot and thrown in the water that morning?
Could we tell that?
2 months later.
It's, the further you move out in time, the more difficult it is. I think that any reasonable person would understand that and appreciate that. And I believe that you could, okay, this is what we do know. It's kind of like a math problem. We're solving for X here. Well, what are our knowns here? We know when he was last seen alive. We know the data off of his phone. and we can timestamp that. And then when he's found, so what we would do is go back and compare what we're seeing with the physical findings of his remains based upon this timeline that has been established digitally. And we could do an approximation. We would look for certain points along the way with changes. The one thing that's really going to be tough with this case, I think, is how far gone his remains may have been at that time. After two months, even though we're heading toward fall, we're going to be getting, and he's already passed the late fall. As a matter of fact, seems like, doesn't the winter equinox happen like, is it the equinox? I don't know what it's called. But anyway, when we go to winter, right, it's generally around December 20th, or it's right before Christmas when that happens.
Right.
So we're heading in that direction. There are going to be significant temperature changes. So how well is he preserved? He's in an aquatic environment, we think, unless he had been killed somewhere else and moved, or had he been held against his will for a protracted period of time, then they bring him back with his underwear on and discard him in the creek. And I think that a lot of that information is being held by the police right now. It just seems really odd. Why would you make him strip down? Why would you not find his clothing somewhere along this roadway that he's walking down? Had he been in the custody of somebody else for 2 months, and that's one of the things, or weeks, that's one of the things that you really want to try to understand with the postmortem changes in this case. Do they marry up with the known timeline, as opposed to maybe he's not as far gone as they might have thought? And that would beg the question, well, when exactly did he die? Can we zero in on that and try to marry that up with the timeline that we have? Again, they haven't released this information yet. One other big piece to this, Dave, is we don't know if this gunshot wound to the head is a through and through. They have not released information if they recovered a projectile out of Blake's head. And of course, if they did, and this is a weapon that was utilized, that may have been utilized in other crimes, well, the ATF has got a fantastic database, ballistic database. As a matter of fact, they probably got the best one in the world that you would go to for sourcing information on expended rounds. If you can recover that round, you can get it to them and try to match it up through their database to see if it marries up with any weapons that's out there. But the case turned, actually, based upon what you had mentioned just a few moments ago. You had said that there were anonymous tips that came in, that there were tips all along. And Dave, jump forward to 2023, this thing is still being worked. And man, the Newnan Police Department actually got an anonymous tip, didn't they?
Right. And, when we were recording and talking about the show, we've got the anonymous tip in 2023, and police actually followed that up. Okay. They pleaded publicly. That tip told them there's more, and there are people that know more. And they also ended up serving search warrants on 2 different properties in 2024. Remember those?
Yes.
They were serving these search warrants and weren't telling anybody a whole lot, but they were looking for something. We don't know if they found anything or not, but we know that they were looking, and it had something to do with Blake Chappell's case. So when you've got a case that, for all intents and purposes, began October 16, 2011, and ends December 19th, 2011, and we don't know anything until now, and they're still working it like this 12 and 13 years later, heck yeah, man. These guys are doing their job, and they are still, you have no idea of how much they are still holding on to. And the reason,
oh my God, yeah,
they're not letting it out. They're not going to let somebody come into this and mess up their case. And you know what, Joe, they did have an arrest finally. And it wasn't anybody who had ever been talked about.
Anybody that had ever,
never even had been talked
ever been investigated.
Never.
Isn't that something that you could have? You could have this young kid, 17 years old, and for some reason his path intersects with this guy who actually turns out had been in the joint for several years.
Yeah.
Which is, quite amazing when you begin to think about what is at stake here. And I believe that this came about as a result of the anonymous tip.
Mm-hmm. I think so too.
And sourcing this, back to this individual. What precisely can you tell us about this arrest that has been effected, Dave?
All right. He was the guy's name is Scotty Elliott Smith. He was never investigated in this case, but he has been arrested and charged, and police say he has confessed to the murder of Blake Chappell. Police served 2 search warrants in Sharpsburg in March of 2024.
Which is just adjacent to it's in Coweta County, and it's outside of Noonan. So it makes sense.
So that's the area we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. That was, and so again, now remember, we had the tip in 2023. We had police saying we need more, so they knew that the top of the soda had been popped. They served the search warrants in 2024, and then here we are, out of the blue, September 12th, 2025. They send out this message: we got an arrest. And I'm looking through all my notes. This guy's got to be on the radar. No, he's nowhere. No. This guy was in jail so much, Joe, I actually double checked to make sure he wasn't in jail when
during this time.
Yeah. He is now charged. By the way, police still asking for more info, which the saddest part is there are so many people that know what happened. And they have maintained at least some form of silence for this long. Who does that?
Something I want to point out about Smith, who they're framing this as he has allegedly confessed. I'm understanding that they have conducted multiple interviews with him, and just because he confesses prior to appearing in a court and all of these sorts of things that you have to go through, that doesn't mean that he's guilty yet. Okay. We have to understand that. We need to temper what we're saying to a certain degree. But Dave, I was doing the math on this. So the alleged perpetrator is 38 right now. Right. So he crossed paths with Blake when Blake, as I've mentioned several times, was 17. He would have been 24 years old at that time.
Young man.
24 years old, out in this area at that time of night. And what was the plan here? Did he just merely see Blake and saw him as an opportunity for mischief? Well, I hate that word because it's not mischief, but malevolent behavior. I mean, is that what we're talking?
Tell you, Joe? What do these charges? I mean, he's charged murder. He's charged aggravated assault, but they've charged him with possession of a firearm or knife during commission and that's a standard charge. I mean, because we already know that Blake was shot in the head. But, tampering with evidence.
Then we go to concealing the death of another.
Joe,
and also tampering.
Does that mean that? The tampering goes with that concealing the death. I mean, concealing the death is not killing him and throwing him over the side of a bridge. And him getting caught up in weeds. What did he do to conceal this death? And how long?
Yeah, precisely. I think that's one of the big questions that's going to be asked and needs to be answered. Is the concealment merely placing Blake in a creek bed that may or may not have water flowing through it at any given time, depending upon rain? And also tampering with evidence. That's an interesting... That's something particular to this case because Blake was absent. He was absent his phone. He's absent clothing. We know. Was this guy retaining clothing off of this kid? I want to know if this guy's involved in any other kind of homicides. Well, because this seems like this case is so incredibly bizarre that these two people, and you have to understand the location where this happened. This is not like in a heavily congested urban area. Right. And it's not necessarily in the sticks. As a matter of fact, this area is really growing. It has grown. Atlanta exploded, certainly in the late 80s into the 90s. This is a bedroom community for Atlanta. This is not a place where you have homicides that are committed, certainly not like this. I want to know if this individual that perpetrated this is some kind of predator. I really do. I think that we would be fascinated to learn that bit of information. And again, why is not something we'll ever get an answer to, but I think what was the motivation here? What was the motivation for snuffing out the life of a 17-year-old? And I think more broadly, had Blake in his short life, had he ever encountered Smith before?
Well,
had that ever happened?
You mentioned that Smith is 24 when this happens.
Yeah.
I looked at his criminal record, and it begins in 2007 when he was just 20 years old. And Scotty Elliott Smith was charged with and indicted on fleeing, attempted to evade, hindering law enforcement, and possession of weed less than an ounce back in 2007. Then he had a number of other run-ins with the law, where he's negotiating, where charges are dropped, he's negotiating his way out. Because if they don't see you as a big-time spender, you're going to get a pass when you're a little bit younger. You're going to get away with a few things. But then 2018, all right? Now, this is, again, between 2007 and 2018. You got an 11-year span here between his first involvement with the law to when he was charged with and indicted on aggravated assault on a peace officer, interference with government property, criminal damage to property, first degree, second degree, aggressive driving, hit and run. Then he goes to jail, and while in jail on those charges and awaiting trial, he's charged with and indicted on violence in a penal institution twice, simple battery twice. In August of 2018, he entered an Alford plea in all those cases, meaning they have enough you're not admitting guilt, but you're admitting that they have enough evidence that if it went before anybody with a brain, you would be guilty. So he pleads it out on all these things, but he's got a laundry list of other things going on here. And he ended up getting a lot of charges dropped through these negotiations. Now, a lot of times police will add on things, they can, when you do something, you can end up with 5 charges for one thing. I get that. But this is a person who now admits that he killed somebody in 2011. What was he doing between the time that he first came into the trouble with the law in 2007, 2011 that he got away with legally? And then what did he do after that murder? Because it looks like things escalated for him from the age of 20 on.
Wouldn't it be fascinating? First off, where did he catch all these charges out of? Were they all out of the metro area of Atlanta? Were any of them specific to Coweta County or any of the adjoining counties like Clayton County, Spalding County, any of those areas in kind of the south to southwest region of Atlanta metropolitan area? And, kind of trying to understand the area that the waters which he would have swam in, Dave.
Yeah. I know that the records I pulled on him were all in Georgia, the Department of Corrections, where he served his time and things like that. But they don't tell us. They don't tell me what counties. I'll have to pull that up now.
Well, another piece to this as well, and this is kind of a sad commentary in the world that we live in right now, and we're seeing the fruits of it all over the place, is what judges did he go before? Was he constantly in front of the same one or two judges that had allowed this to go on? And look, I know the judges cannot predict the future, but there are certain behaviors that come into play when you see a person over and over again, and they become a habitual offender at that point in time, and they have no respect for the law. They have no respect for the norms of society. My question is, somebody that is, in fact, a habitual offender, if you keep giving them passes over and over again, that kind of emboldens them. And I'm wondering if during that period of time, if he felt so bold that he encounters this kid just walking down the road. I mean, did Blake, did he say something as a car was passing? Because this guy's already got an issue, I think, in one of the charges, Dave, you had mentioned that he's got an issue with, I think it was like a reckless driving thing or something like this, where he's utilizing a weapon or he's utilizing a vehicle that could be implied it could be weaponized.
Aggressive driving and hit and run.
Yeah. And so he's out on the road. He sees this kid and he doesn't think anybody else is around. And the kid, I don't know, maybe Blake made some kind of provocative or what he interpreted as provocative move toward him. And he's like, no, I'm ending this kid's life. Well, we don't know, but I can tell you this. I don't know necessarily that anybody that is involved in this case is going to sleep better because this guy's behind bars right now in the Coweta County Jail. And there will never be perfect peace in the lives of those who loved Blake and who miss Blake. But I do know this. We're on the road right now to more answers in this case. And as things develop, I can promise you this. Myself and Brother Dave Mack are going to be following Blake's case, and we'll update you as soon as we hear something. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.